I change things, still I fear the answer's no. In this fucked up world in which I feel I stand alone. All this hate that I feel for you, my one true enemy, once was blind, but now I see. It makes me question, why do we choose to live this way? I try to free my mind from what's not meant to be. It makes me question why.
You know, I just knew this would happen eventually. I knew we'd find ourselves here. I knew somehow I was going to come to repossess this game, because I got rid of it after I bought it the first time. And here we are. You know, I knew this was going to happen, because it's like my thing to go over games of series that I happen to enjoy that may or may not have kind of sort of destroyed every credible point of said series. You know, I've already gone over Sonic Next Gen like 4 times, gone over Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness twice, so here we are, Metroid Other M, and let's talk about this. And you know, to start, I'm gonna say this, and I really feel like we need to get this point across. I don't really look at Other M and consider it a bad game. It's hard to explain, because it's not like the other 2, which were horrible for a variety of reasons, up to and including the fact that they were broken as shit from a gameplay perspective. No, see, because Other M is functional. It's a finished product. Like you can't sit back here and say that the game doesn't work, or that it's really buggy, or that there's game-breaking bugs. No, this game totally works. It doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel half-assed. Like, I can sit down and play this and say that this game was finished and is working as intended. My problem is that the way it was intended to work is not good. Like, you can make a game that works exactly the way you want it to. It doesn't mean that what it's actually doing is a positive impact on everything around it. And that's the case with Other M. Like, oh yeah, it's great, it's working, it's fine, you know, this is what they wanted. And what they wanted is not at all what anyone else wanted, whatsoever. I mean, we gotta get that point across. Because on the surface, you can look at it and say, it looks like a decent experience, and from certain standpoints, yeah, it's not bad. It's just not really Metroid. I guess I can go over the graphics and the sound first, because I will say the sound overall is actually really good. The music is appropriate, it's Metroid-y. And the voice acting, yes, there's voice acting in the game, is actually alright. I've heard complaints that the voice acting is bad. That's not really true. It's not bad. The acting itself isn't bad. It's the script, which I'm going to talk about later. That's the issue. But the actual acting itself is fine. Is it, you know, anything to write home about? Well, no, but it gets the job done. Visually, the game is actually quite good for being on the Wii, you know, and that console was never at the pushing visual barriers or anything. But it looks fine, you know, it looks pretty decent. Samus is looking fine. Fine. That is how she's looking.
You, gonna hit on her at all?
Shut up.
Flirt? At all? That's like what you do.
Nope, not doing it. I'm not doing it.
No? Really?
Let's just move on to— oh! I swear, doing that's never going to get old. What is wrong with you? I didn't even do anything that time! Ah, but you were thinking it, and that's really the important part for me. Is this gonna be your thing? Just to mess with me, like every chance you get? Is that what you're gonna do? And I'm getting really fucking sick of it. Really? Why haven't you done anything yet? I'll get to it. But not now. Oh, how I look forward to that day. Visually, the game is good. It's the gameplay where things start getting hazy. The game made a lot of really weird decisions on how to handle mechanics. To begin with, you control the game by holding the Wiimote sideways and treating it like an actual controller. There's actually no nunchuck support at all. And for a game released in 2010, having no analog support seems bizarre. Especially since this game operates off of a 3D plane. You know, analog would be nice to at least have the option, but I don't believe you even have the ability to use the nunchuck even if you wanted to. You have to control the game by holding the Wiimote sideways. And that just seems like a very strange choice until you understand what they were attempting to do with Other M. And from this standpoint, I actually admire this game in a real way because I kind of appreciate what they wanted to do here. The idea was to take the actual 2D Metroid games and straight up convert one of them into a 3D experience. It wasn't like Metroid Prime, which was kind of doing its own thing but still operating off of the same general Metroid rules. But, you know, trying to change things up because it was 3D, so they had to change the things. Other M wants to take the 2D games and actually make them straight up 3D and do things exactly the way the 2D games would, but with a third dimension. And a lot of things about Other M feel very old school. It feels very much like a classic style Metroid game, or a 2D one at the very least, like Metroid Fusion. In fact, I'm going to bring up Metroid Fusion a lot during this spiel, because Metroid Fusion is one of my favorite Metroid games ever. You have a very classic style map system that you can look at any time and figure out where you are. You have a very classic style control scheme with a D-pad, which is odd. You have a very classic style environment choice that reminds me heavily of what you would find in a 2D Metroid game, where there's different sections to go in and each room offers different puzzles to deal with and different enemy types to deal with, as well as having various upgrades to deal with those specific enemy types. It feels like Metroid Fusion. And in fact, I actually would argue that it feels way too much like Metroid Fusion sometimes, because I would almost say that this game rips off Metroid Fusion almost wholesale. And that bothers me, because A, it's not a remake of Metroid Fusion, and yes, I know, can you really rip off a game within the same series? And I suppose you can't, but it doesn't feel like it's doing its own thing anymore. It just feels like Metroid Fusion if it was given a third dimension and a slightly different story. And I actually have to stress slightly different story, because the game's story really isn't that different from Metroid Fusion's. Like, not enough to really care. You know, it's like, oh no, they're weaponizing Metroids. Metroid Fusion, they're like, oh no, they're weaponizing, we've been here before. Actually, chronologically speaking, we haven't been here before, because Metroid Fusion comes after Other M in the timeline. So, we've been here before, but not really. We've been here before, alright? Just, you've done this before, and it doesn't feel like a new game. It feels like you took Metroid Fusion and just tried to make it 3D, but then decided to do something different, yet is still taking elements from that game. I mean, you're still in a space station, there's still environmental sectors, there's still scientists who work doing weird experiments with alien life forms, they're still trying to weaponizing Metroids. I mean, it's all the same kind of stuff we've seen in Metroid Fusion. I don't understand why they thought that that would be appealing in any real way, and then it doesn't do things as well as Fusion. The plot isn't nearly as interesting as in Fusion, and they tried to give Samus more personality. And I admire that idea in a way, because I think that's a good thing for her. Because prior to now, did Samus ever really have a personality? Samus never spoke. She's like Link. And sure, you can judge these characters by their actions, and you can't necessarily say that they had no personality, because they very clearly do. Samus, you could tell, was extremely brave, and honestly sometimes just didn't give a shit. I mean, she could be confronted with enemies 12 times her size and still take them on. That's how awesome she was. She didn't have to speak to get the point across. Allowing her to talk to enhance that character, I think, would be a good thing, if by allowing her to talk, didn't actually turn her into a complete and utter pansy. And let me try to explain this. See, Samus monologues a lot, and sometimes those monologues are actually really interesting, and they're not all that different from what you would find in the text in Metroid Fusion, because she did speak in that game. It was just through text. So hearing Samus's inner thoughts aren't necessarily bad, it's just sometimes her thoughts are a little... I don't understand her actions. Like, in the very beginning of the game, she decides that she's going to listen to Adam. And the thing about Adam is that he was her commanding officer when she was in the United Planetary Defense Force, whatever the fuck they were, and, you know, in the military. And he was her commanding officer, and they had sort of a father-daughter relationship. People seem to think that Adam was like her boyfriend, and the game makes it very clear that Adam was the closest thing she had to a father because her parents died when she was young. They were killed by Ridley. However, they had a falling out, which is explained in the plot. And when they meet again, he's kind of sort of hostile towards her, but not really. And she's on site with a bunch of other military troops, and he asks her to, at the very least, she's going to stay, follow his commands, which would be fine if part of his commands were not telling her to turn off, like, all of her armament. See, that's the game's sort of power wall. There's a lot of Metroid games will do this. In the beginning of the game, they'll remove all of Samus's power-ups, which is very normal for this kind of experience. It's to make sure that you don't have just all the, you know, obligatory obliteration abilities. A lot of games will do that. God of War 2 did that with Kratos. Eliminated all his, you know, awesome abilities in the very beginning of the game, and you have to go and get them back, or at least get different ones. Here, Samus actually has them the entire time, though. The only reason she doesn't use them is that Adam didn't authorize it. And I can't even tell you how stupid that could come off. And it would make sense if it was just the weapons, because they're dealing with sort of a survivor situation here. And Adam is very concerned about some of Samus's abilities, because she's extremely powerful. He wants her to turn off some of her more powerful abilities for later use, because he doesn't want to risk harming any survivors. Okay, fine. I can get behind that. Super bombs, off limits, that makes sense. Certain, you know, power-ups like the plasma beam and stuff like that, okay, fine, I get that. But tell me something, why does Samus have to turn off her defensive mechanisms? Because he doesn't let her turn on her fire barrier, her Varia upgrade, until she absolutely has to. In fact, he forces her to wander through a heated environment that is actually causing her damage until later, when he finally then tells her to turn on her Varia suit. Why? Why would he make her do that? That makes no sense, because the entire, you know, story is about how Adam really does care about Samus and, you know, views her as, you know, kind of a daughter and that sort of deal. If he cares about her, why would he put her at unnecessary risk? It's not like having the Varia function on is going to cause anyone else harm. You're not, the whole hostage, you know, survivor thing, whatever, is a non-factor now, because, you know, there's no offensive capability there. So you make her walk through fucking lava. Why? There is literally no reason except that I just didn't want you to. That is actually the only reason given, as far as I could tell. And it's fucking stupid. And the whole time, Samus just feels like she's acting out of character. I know that doesn't make sense, like I said, because she's never spoken before, so could we really tell what her character was? And I suppose, to a certain extent, no. But then, even by her actions, she isn't acting appropriately. But I think the biggest example of this, I could tell you, is before the Ridley fight, because yes, Ridley's in this game. Oh, I'm sorry, I spoiled that. It's almost like he's in almost every single Metroid game. Shut up, stop bitching. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that, you know, right before the Ridley fight, okay, Ridley shows up unexpectedly, because this is after Super Metroid, so she thinks he's dead. So when he shows up again, you know, it's a surprise, but then she just, like, freezes up and freaks out, and goes with, like, this PTSD sort of thing. And that would make sense if this was the first time she saw him since her parents died. Hell, this would also make sense if this was the first time she saw him since she defeated him the first time. Okay, you know, I could get behind that. But this is like the 5th fucking time we've been here before. Like, the dude's come back at least 4 times prior to this, I think. Chronologically speaking, I mean, there was the first Metroid game, and there was Prime 1 and Prime 3. Those are the 3 I could think of. So at least 3 times you've seen him. Oh, no, in Super Metroid, there's 4. So 4 times he's come back, and you had to fight him again. Tell me, why are you freaking out about this? Why are you having this, you know, ridiculous, oh my god, flashback now? If she were operating even remotely in character, her reaction should be more of a, really? Again? Like, she should just be sick of this by now. I mean, hell, look at her reaction in the first Prime game. She doesn't freak out when she sees Meta Ridley. I mean, and shit, he's pretty terrifying in his own way. She just, you know, wants to take him on. I mean, that's what Samus does. But in this game, all of a sudden, she's like, oh my god, it's Ridley, I don't know. You kind of sort of removed some of her strength a little bit as a character, I felt. You know, I mean, Samus is supposed to be one of the strongest female characters in gaming, and to a certain extent, this game kind of makes her a bit weaker. And I'm all for giving her personality. I'm all for that. I mean, I think that was a great idea. It's just the way they did it just inhibited her. I mean, okay, let's talk about Lara Croft for a second. You know, one of my favorite game characters ever, and another contender for best female video game heroine of all time. Alright, when Lara has an emotional breakdown, and she has them, it happens, her reactions are far more hostile. You know, she almost kills Amanda because she thinks Amanda killed her mom. And it's a completely reasonable reaction to show that kind of emotion. But she doesn't show weakness. Lara doesn't break down and cry and get all mopey or, you know, have a PTSD moment. No, she just smacks the shit out of Amanda. That's what I would expect from Samus in this situation. Ridley's back, he killed her parents, fucking blow the shit out of him. And you know what the hell of it is? The Ridley boss fight, the actual fight itself, is probably one of the better parts of the game. It really is. From a gameplay standpoint, it was the only time during the game where I didn't feel any of the flaws, really. It was action-packed, fast-paced, and it required skill. And this is where I'm getting into actual game flaws, because the gameplay itself really isn't as good as other Metroid games. I compare this game a lot to the Prime games because they're the other 3D games in the series. Or, well, I'll compare it to Fusion too. Even from that standpoint, the game feels like it's almost on autopilot a lot of the time. The problem, I feel, is the way they handle the combat and platforming specifically. To begin with, the platforming is on autopilot like you wouldn't believe. And it actually is very similar to Ninja Gaiden 3 in that regard. Remember how I complained in my Ninja Gaiden 3 review where certain jumps would actually feel almost guided? Like they would force you to go in the right direction. That happens all the fucking time in Other M, and I don't know why. Like, what is the problem with letting the player mess up? When did we start this idea that you have to hold the player's hand the entire run of a fucking game because you're afraid they'll fall in a pit and die or something? I mean, every time I jump, I feel like the game is actually slightly guiding my hand. You know, I am more than capable of doing this myself, game. You don't need to do that. The combat is even worse because it's very spastic, and the dodging is so dirt simple it's not even funny. All you do to dodge any attack is hit the D-pad in any direction right before the attack hits you, and that's it. There's no secondary dodge button, it's just the D-pad, which is dumb because you're already pressing the D-pad to move around anyway, so basically it means there's almost never a reason to get hit. You'll be able to dodge most things as long as you're paying the least bit of attention, or hell, just mashing the D-pad around, because the timing isn't that specific. It's not like you have to, like, you know, really practice or get the technique down. No, just mash the D-pad and she'll probably dodge the damn thing. Sometimes on her own. Again, it's so on autopilot it's not even funny, and even some of the execution moves are the same way. The game's tutorial is funny with this regard, because it tells you that, oh, to do an execution move, you have to press the 1 button. I find that sometimes I don't need to press a damn thing and she still kills the enemy on her own anyway. So what's the point of doing anything? Okay. Because Ninja Gaiden 2 had obliteration techniques, and I complained about them because they made the combat a bit easier. But at least there, I had to hit something, I had to hit a button where I had to do anything, and I had to know that the enemy was delimbed. Here, fuck it, like, there's no strategy, there's no real challenge ever, and that just drives me crazy. The only real challenge is caused by the way missiles work in the game, and I cannot believe they did this, because this is fucking stupid, and you're gonna love this when I tell you it. Missiles can only be used in the first-person view, and that is just the most obnoxious thing I have ever seen, and I don't understand why. Oh wait, yeah I do. It's because you're using the fucking Wiimote instead of the nunchuck. The nunchuck would have given you 2 extra buttons on top of the analog to use for this particular function, and you wouldn't have had to worry about it. You know, but instead because they're using the stupid Wiimote controls, in order to go in first-person view, you hold the Wiimote vertically, and then and only then can you use missiles. And then you can only use them certain times. Only when you lock onto certain spots will it let you use missiles. And that just feels like the game's forcing me to do certain things. Like, why can't I use missiles for everything, like in every other Metroid game in the series? It doesn't help that the only real buggy part of the game that I believe exists is the first-person view, because let me tell you, it's not like Metroid Prime at all. I mean, looking at it, you would think that's the case, but it isn't, because the thing about Metroid Prime's first-person view is that it was actually good. And here, it feels very jittery and very specific. And sometimes when I do it, when I'm facing an enemy, I wind up turning all the way around, and then instantly. And that's the most frustrating goddamn thing in the world, because I'm trying to shoot enemies, and I have to do it fairly quickly, because again, you can't move when you're in first-person view. It's impossible. So what this game is telling me is that whenever Samus uses her missiles in any circumstances, she punts her feet and stops moving. That is how she reacts to situations. Oh wait, no, that can't be, because she fires missiles on her own in any other situation just fine. But in this game, no, she has to stand completely fucking still, and then there's the times where you have to use the fucking visor to scan stuff. This also annoys me because it's very, very guided on the basis that you can only scan certain things in certain situations, mostly just to enhance the plot. Remember in Metroid Prime and all the Metroid Prime games where you could scan fucking everything? And honestly, I thought that was really cool. It added depth to the world that otherwise wouldn't be there. In fact, many of the elements of the story you could only learn through scanning. It was a very interesting way of telling the plot without actually speaking a word. This game? No, you only scan what the game tells you to, and only when the game tells you to do it. And that's it. There's no running around and scanning different objects just to see what they are. There's no world immersion of any kind. It's just here because fuck it. And I love how they toted the first-person view as if it's just like Metroid Prime. No, it's nothing like Metroid Prime, because Metroid Prime is actually fucking good! The only good parts of this game, like truly good, by Metroid standards, are the Ridley boss fight and the post-game. I say the post-game because, again, there was a boss fight that wouldn't have otherwise been there. And it was actually fun. It was actually pretty hard. And it tied up the loose ends with the story, and there are certain parts of the story that I actually kind of like. Telling Samus' backstory was a good thing, and explaining her relationship with Adam and how that worked out made sense to do it because Adam was more of a footnote in Metroid Fusion. It was interesting to get to see that fleshed out a bit. I just felt like the way they did it just weakened Samus as a character. And that's just a thing you don't do. Like, ever. You shouldn't do that to her. She deserves better than that. Maybe in the writers' heads they weren't doing that. Maybe to them it, came off differently. But to me, I felt like it undermined her. And I'm just not okay with that. Samus Aran is one of the strongest, most independent female heroines ever to be in a video game. She's a fan favorite for female gamers and male gamers alike. And she's one of the best characters ever put in a digital medium, period, in my opinion. That's saying a lot considering prior to Other M she never said anything. Not, outside of text. But here all of a sudden they give her a voice and now she comes off as weak. And I don't expect all my female heroines to not have weaknesses. Lara Croft had weaknesses and she was still strong. And in the Tomb Raider reboot, they showed her as a younger woman who was just learning her way in life. And of course she was going to show weaknesses and break down and cry sometimes. She was in an extreme situation, that made sense. But the thing about Samus and Other M is this. Samus, by this point in the timeline, is an experienced, hardened bounty hunter who shouldn't be fazed by almost anything these days. And yet all of a sudden, she's portrayed as weak and inexperienced, almost like a rookie. If this were a prequel to the original Metroid, this sort of behavior would make a lot of sense. But by now, she should not be acting this way. It's that simple. I suppose the question at large at this point is, can I recommend Other M to anybody? And if you haven't played it, I really do feel that it's not a bad game. It's just a flawed game, and we expect better from a series like Metroid. A series that has had no bad games at all, basically. Metroid 2 was the only odd one out, and that's not even a really bad game, it's just kind of subpar. But here is a time where they made a game that's kind of average, and almost spits in the face of a lot of fans with the way they portrayed their favorite character. So, from that regard, I can understand why many Metroid fans would avoid this one, and to be honest, you could probably just read the plot synopsis online. The gameplay really isn't worth it anyway. Maybe if you can find it cheap in a bargain bin, but other than that, not really worth your time. Though it is leagues better than Sonic Next Gen and Angel of Darkness, I can say that. So, you still can't complain like I can. Because, wow, at least they delivered you a finished product. Not a good product, but a finished product. So, there's that. Till next time. this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.